Good afternoon. This is Blake Hull with Knowledge Infusion. And as the moderator for today's event, I'd like to thank you for joining us. Knowledge Infusion co-founders Jason Averbook and Heidi Spirgi will discuss their top predictions for this year and highlight prescriptive call to actions to ensure HR leaders are well equipped and prepared. Next slide, please. Before today's discussion, we invite you to get connected with us by liking our company page on Facebook, that's provided here, and also following us on Twitter at Infusion. By so, you'll stay up to date about Knowledge Infusion and stay up to date about key industry information and insights. You can also do today's webinar discussion live on Twitter at #KI2012. A few housekeeping items before we begin. Next slide, please. It's presented via integrated computer-based audio. If you have problems with the audio, please chat into the screen and I'll assist you. The audio backup number for the event is also posted here. You might jot that number down in case you do experience any issues with the audio. One of the most common questions we get is, can we get a copy of the slides? And the answer is yes. You'll receive an email with instructions on how to download both the slides and a replay after today's presentation. As always, we want today's event to be interactive, so please post comments or questions at any time by the right Q&A panel provided on your screen. And submitting a question in the Q&A panel or simply letting us know what some of your 2012 initiatives are, you'll receive a free dry erase magnetic desktop whiteboard, which you can use to get organized for the new year, jot down your to-do lists, and most importantly, perhaps capture some of your unique action items taken away from this webinar. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's presenters. Heidi Spirgi, Knowledge Infusion President. Hi, Heidi. Thanks for joining us.
Blake, thanks so much. I'm excited for the day.
And we also have Jason Averbook, Knowledge Infusion CEO, with us.
Hey, Blake.
I'm well, thanks. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Heidi, for joining us. And Jason, I'm going to hand it over to you to get started.
Thanks so much. So thank you for everyone joining. And as Blake said, one of the things that is really, really important to us and really important to go into 2012 is how do we stay connected as a community. 2012 is going to be a killer year in the HR and HR technology space, and to do that, it takes a village to change this world. I'd love for you to connect with us. So I went back to this slide on connect with us on Facebook, connect with us on @Infusion on Twitter. Use these tools. We're going to use them a ton. We help you in whatever way we can drive your HR and HR strategies forward in 2012. So like on Facebook, like us on Twitter. Let's make sure that we drive attendance up in all of those different avenues. So let's jump into about Knowledge Infusion. And really quick, I think a lot of you on the phone know about us, but let's go ahead and real quick summary. Knowledge Infusion is an organization Heidi and myself founded, as Blake said, about 6 years ago, really tied to helping HR organizations change the world. Look at that for a second. Change the world. How do we change the world? We start with making sure we have clear strategies that are aligned to business goals, that we can execute on those strategies, and how do we deploy our strategies? Everything from deploying technology to deploying process to deploying change. In order to deploy a strategy, there's a lot more than just an implementation, and we're going to talk about that. And then lastly, our on-demand service, the leading global on-demand service, and being able to ask questions whenever you want to any of our consultants, to any of our leaders, about what we're seeing in the HR space, the HR technology space. How do you execute? How do you execute, and how do you move from idea? Once again, all in the effort of making sure that we can change this space forever. So what we're going to do today, I'd love to get people to say yes, no, shut up, we can hear you. Comments. Type in some comments in the Q&A box just so we can get some comments. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to discuss some top predictions for 2012. Now, what's a prediction? Prediction is an idea based on what we're seeing from our customers, what we're seeing from our prospects, what we're seeing from our vendors in this, and the direction that they're going, to give insight into those. The second thing is that we're going to talk about prescriptions. Okay, prescriptions that will help you to transform your future. Okay, when I say your future, your future as a leader, future as a person that's looking to make change, and finally, your HR function needs to act. Now, everyone always says afterwards, well, this is great. It's great that we have some people on the phone, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but we can't get our leaders to think differently. If you say, I want our leaders to hear this message, please contact me. Because to deliver this message whenever, wherever, to whomever, so that it gets out there. Well, the only way we're going to change this space and change the space forever is by all of us as a village work together. So very, very excited to present this today and really excited to talk about the agenda. Now, these 8 predictions, once again, some of these are going to make a ton of sense to you. Some are going to hit home. Some are going to say, wow, you guys smoking something. Not all, one size doesn't fit all, but let's make sure that we take away things that we're going to use to change the space. And ask questions. Ask as many questions as you can throughout. The question already, does the whiteboard come with markers? No idea. But if markers, let me know. Agenda. The business. Business is changing so fast. Can you make predictions and can you make trends? And what does HR need to do to keep up? How to recast the HR function to drive to 2012? 2012 for everyone on the phone. How do we cast the function? What is real-time talent management, and how is that different from what we've seen in the past? We organizations are changing their HR technology. Right? Are they going to do it wrong? And what is this era of mass replacements that we're about to enter going to look like for all of us? The act of software as a service and cloud computing. You can't anywhere without thinking about clouds. What does that mean to us? Death limitations. What does that mean? Data. Who data? Where is it going? And last, business social. What is business social and who owns it? These are the things we're going to talk about on the call today. And with each of these, there's a ton of other content. What I want to do is I want to turn it over to Heidi Spirgi, the person that actually helps us really, really think about the future of HR and HR technology and HR strategy, for to lead off this top area, which is the Agile Business. And once again, just to make sure you guys are still interacting, either on the Twitter stream, or on the Q&A, please put in how this agenda looks and areas that you want us to go deeper. There you are, running.
Great. Thank you, Jason. And first of all, before we get to the very important topic of the Agile Business, the whiteboard does come with a marker. So those of you who don't have markers, you will get a marker with the whiteboard.
Real-time talent management. Real-time talent management. We got that answer out.
Yeah. And just think that answer would not be out there. We would with the power of collaboration. So
awesome.
That was not information I entered the webinar with. It was real-time information. So just keep that in mind, and as you think about how we need to equip the workforce moving forward. So Agile Business. So Jason just made a really, I think, a fantastic comment, and it made me think. He mentioned he used the term helping HR change the world. For those of you who have known Knowledge Infusion for a while, and know Jason and I personally, I think you know that that's really our fundamental mission, both as individuals as well as the mission for the company. The interesting thing is, though, helping HR change the world. I mean, I think one of the big challenges in doing that is that the world is changing so fast that many HR organizations and many business leaders are really struggling to even understand the world. What does that mean? What is the world today? Because the world today looks very, very different than it did even a year or two ago. And I think an interesting headline in today's news, for those of you who haven't seen it, is that Apple announced today, based on the earnings announced yesterday, that they are in fact the largest company in the world. So they passed Exxon based on their earnings announcement from yesterday. So with a market cap of $424 billion. Just stop and think about what an organization like Apple meant to the world of even 5 years ago. It was really hard to imagine an organization that really has its fundamental basis for existence based on information and collaboration. And those are the two things that Apple delivers to the world that no other organization has even come close to being able to do. As a result of that, as a result of the success of technologies that Apple is really leading the world in, but we see many, many other organizations also leading the way, even at the functional level, such as HR or finance or CRM and supply chain, the world is becoming increasingly agile.
Apple is bigger than Exxon?
Apple is bigger than Exxon.
Apple's killing the textbook as we know it today.
Yep, absolutely.
So when you look at that, that from a business change standpoint, there are things that a year ago or 2 years ago, 3 years ago, for anyone that remembers the Sony Walkman, I wonder if anyone had one of those, hard to predict. So when we look at the business changing, do you see from HR? Do you see HR jumping in and responding?
I see some HR organizations jumping in and responding. I think most HR organizations today recognize that they have to change. I think that HR is really struggling to figure out what that means to them. They need to do differently to be more agile and more responsive to this very, very different world. And really look at it as, because business is really moving at the speed of light. Even faster. I think it's interesting that the world is flat was published 7 years ago now, and the world is even flatter today. And not only is it flat, which is really premised on this concept of being a completely global, interconnected business world, but it's also extremely fluid and extremely dynamic and extremely fast, faster than ever. And what that means is that it's really tough for organizations to pin down a strategy that's going to last for 3 years, 5 years, such that our organizations used to build. It's really tough for them to do workforce planning in a way that makes sense based on some sort of constant and steady notion of what do we need to do to equip the workforce, what kind of workers do we need for the next 3 to 5 years. What we're seeing is that the world that we live in, because of things in organizations like Apple, because of this incredible paradigm shift and incredible transformation of technology, as we know, connecting people, enabling business to move much faster than ever before, and probably even more importantly, connecting people. It's minds, it's the knowledge, it's the information. It's the inspiration and the innovation that's really creating the change at this lightning speed. And what that's doing is it's really freeing organizations from any former infrastructure constraints. So if we look at just a few examples of our customers, and you think about their world of 5 to 10 years ago, across the functional areas, whether they were constrained by inventory, by time to ship based on their warehouse and their distribution centers. Even from an HR perspective, you think about what it was like to enter the workforce 5 to 10 years ago, or even 2 years ago, or maybe in some organizations that may be as advanced today, and you're trying to find a network of people who care about the same things that you care about, who are working on common things. It took time. It took 12 to 24 months to 36 months to really build that network internally, whereas today that infrastructure constraint or that time-based constraint is removed. Mail used to hold back from employee communications. Things like how do we connect people around the workforce, around the globe, to work collaboratively on projects, to share information and ideas real time on a daily basis or on a real basis, to sit together in a virtual room, to share information, collaborate, and drive that innovation. The infrastructure constraints really have really fallen to the wayside in the last several years. One of the other things I think is really important is death of the 80-20 rule. I think that a lot of decisions used to be made organizationally based on, well, if it works for 80% of the workforce or 80% of the business, then it's a good thing to move forward with. It's something that's worthy of investment. Nothing works for 80% of the workforce. Nothing works for 80% of the world. What we're seeing is just a interesting blending of micro trends, micro needs, very diverse needs. And what's exciting is that because technology has new levels of flexibility, which we'll talk about in a little bit, organizations are really able to meet that diversity of needs today in a very interesting way by combining and mixing solutions and processes and being much more responsive to the micro need rather than just having to do everything in broad strokes and everything at that macro level. It's very exciting and driving a lot of new and novel solutions. So one of the things HR leaders need to do is to think about technology is really, it's kind of like a box of paints. It's a box of paints at the palette, and it's really only limited by your own imagination as to how you can meet the needs of the business with that palette. So what I would encourage everyone on the phone to do is to think not about what are the quote-unquote best practices that they need to copy and paste into their organizations. Really, what are the discrete and unique needs of their organization, and how can they leverage the technologies at their disposal to really address those needs? Jason?
I mean, it's spotty, and I think that, from a prediction standpoint, we don't need a prediction to say that business is agile. Holy cow. I mean, we do it every single day. What's important to you is that you, as an HR leader, or all HR leaders, just the fact that there's 400 people joining this call, you not wait for the vendors to tell you best practice. Vendors know your business. And even if you tell them the vendors are awesome at listening, business, you have to understand how to best use, capital U-S-E, technology to meet the needs of this agile business. If you don't, your technology initiatives will always be seen as failures. So you best meet the needs of agile business. And we started with this as number one on purpose. If we don't start with this, nothing else matters. You have to understand there are people work for the same company 20 years. This management strategy works for 5 years. The same for 2 years. It is that fast, and if you're not thinking that fast, you're all behind and die. So, question: do you feel that your business must be more agile today than in the past? Yes, no, or I don't see a difference. This is all a bunch of hype. Why are you guys wasting my time with these discussions? I'd love to see this, and I think that there's going to be a overwhelming response, one way or the other. Heidi, what do you think?
Yeah, I would be surprised if we don't see at 100% at A. It'll be interesting to see, and I would love to actually have a conversation with anyone who says no. I would be fascinated by that industry because the world simply is so different and so fast and so needs to be so flexible and responsive.
So as the results are coming in, do you want to talk about sort of where we're at from a talent standpoint, and it's going to lead into some of our next discussions?
Absolutely. And one of the things we all are acutely aware of, and probably most of us have been touched in some personal way by friends or family or even ourselves, with the tremendously high unemployment around the world. One of the things, though, that is very interesting is that despite that very high unemployment and the economic troubles globally, organizations are still having incredibly difficult times filling roles. So as you can see here, 63%, and this is from a recent survey that Knowledge Infusion did together with HR, 63% of organizations say that they're having trouble filling roles because they can't find the right candidates internally or externally. 48% say their workforce is maxed out. 63% say that it's not easy to find and retain quality talent. So it's clearly an ongoing challenge for organizations. One of the reasons for that is because of the speed of change within the world today. Skills are rapidly becoming obsolete. And every single one of our customers, whether they're in retailer, whether they're in hospitality, media and publishing, manufacturing, high tech, it's not just IT jobs, which are just turning their head overnight and really creating challenges for organizations to respond to the business. It's every single industry that we're seeing this in. So I think you can see the results have come in, and that we're showing 98% of respondents feel that their business must be more agile today, and 2% saying that they don't see a difference. But it's
98's enough for a for categories, and at least we can say one of our predictions is right?
Exactly.
We're going to talk about this a little more when we get to real-time talent management, but one of the things we've been saying is, guys, this isn't a war for talent. This is a war for skills. and have to understand skills by what skills are needed by role. The huge concept of war for talent won't work. It's down micro level, as Heidi said, and understanding specific roles. Where are we having a hard time finding people? I'm going to ask this question: are you having a harder time finding people because we just did this in this survey we're showing you here? But I mean, at Knowledge Infusion, we're having a hard time finding people. Anyone that wants a job, let us know. But I mean, the ability to find people today is very, very hard. Very hard. So as the business becomes more agile, what's the prescription? What are the actions that people need to take?
Yeah, one of the first things I think that I would encourage organizations to do is they have to be laser focused and crystal clear on what they're trying to accomplish with their workforce. And when I say workforce, notice I'm not using the word employee, because one of the things HR needs to do to respond to this agile business is to look at really find a whole new definition of workforce. It's full-time, it's part-time, it's contingent. It's looking at project teams. It's being able to mix and match skills and capability internally and externally with many, many different employment models at the core of that to really meet the real-time changing needs of the agile business. It's HR departments who feel that their primary focus and agenda and mission is to create a positive employment experience for their full-time employees. Definitely need to expand their focus outside those and beyond those full-time employees. Those full-time employees are going to become an increasingly smaller percentage of the workforce, and what we do with those full-time employees, we need to be much more creative and much more agile and nimble with how we deploy them, how we rotate them, how we develop them, how we create cross-functional project teams to meet the ever-changing needs of the business. So that's one thing that's very important. As part of that, organizations really need to be very laser-focused on where is the business going and what do we need to do from a talent perspective to support that direction, and then ultimately, what's the information and the decisions that need to be made around the workforce that we need to leverage technology and data to build our process and technologies around those. Far too often we see organizations focusing on the process or the tech as the core, whereas the decision and outcome and outputs of those solutions really need to be at the core. The second point here is investing in emerging technologies. I am honestly of the opinion that no organization today can be agile without emerging technologies. The technology has defined and created the agility of the business world today. And for any function, whether it be HR or other, that doesn't understand that in order to support the agile business, not going to be able to really support the business that they're looking for. So really ensure that you're looking not at what's done and what's worked historically, but really where is the world going. Build global, mobile, and social upfront. Far too often we see organizations really looking at global, mobile, and social as afterthoughts to a process or to an implementation or a deployment of technology. It has to be upfront. If you plan for it with phase 2, most likely you'll never get there. And that is last point is really essential, and that is there is really no such thing today as best practices. It's really looking at the next practices. It's emerging. What will your organization look like, or what do you want it to look like 12 to 24 months from now, and build toward that, and simply what's, once again, worked in the past for other organizations or within your industry.
So thank you for that. So as we look at Agile, we talk about Agile. Everyone agrees on Agile. Let's talk about next, and how does HR respond? There's been a number of really interesting questions that have come in. Is HR now the facilitator, in a facilitator role between leaders and the workforce? How do we become more agile? What issues do we look out for, et cetera, et cetera? So Heidi, why don't you jump into this and talk about sort of how we see the HR function needing change in order to execute on the agility that business is showing?
Okay, so it's to change in a lot of ways. I think for those of you who've grown up in the HR function, I think you've probably already seen a lot of change. I'm actually very proud of many HR leaders that we work with the amount of change they've driven into the functions over the last 5 years. But we're really just at the beginning, and at the same time, there's a lot of HR functions that haven't really done that transformation process. I would go as far as to say that the HR function and design, mission, purpose, processes, agenda, you name it, of the 20th century and even of the last 10 years, as well as what I would call phase one talent management, has really become quickly irrelevant. And become irrelevant because of the speed of change that the businesses that the businesses that they're supporting are undergoing. So if you look at today, and I'm going to give you some examples. If you look at what organizations are really starting to drive toward, and every one of our customers, they're trying to drive higher levels of innovation, higher levels of collaboration, higher levels of productivity and efficiency into their workforce. And had an opportunity to speak with a CEO of a Fortune 500 company just yesterday, and he was talking about the importance of the combination of collaboration and productivity to the CEO today in order to meet the CEO's agenda. And one of the things he said is that he's struggling with, as we see most businesses, struggling with any type of accountability for productivity, for innovation, for collaboration. And it's really an opportunity for HR to step up and say, these are people problems, this is a problem of the workforce, and HR is going to own it. Organizational structures and the way that HR has been designed historically does not support the way the business is wanting to work with HR. So the old model of process and functionally focused and siloed-based centers of excellence and business partners and generalist organizations that are focusing simply on individual lines of business or business units create far too many walls in organizations. Problems that's created by that: number one, the old OE model lacks the ability. In most organizations, they struggle to do things such as, how do we collectively define demand? How do we collectively create an insight into our workforce supply internally and externally? How do we respond in a very nimble and agile way to mobilize our workforce, whether it be retooling them with new skills or moving them around the organization across functions or across business units to respond to the changing needs of the business? The old business partner and COE model, organization after organization struggles with that. I talked about this a little bit, but the one size fits all does not work. You have to be really very, very targeted in the way that you work with the business and recognize that business unit and departmental specific needs are very legitimate, and HR with the right tools and the right processes in place can support some of those micro needs and should support some of those micro needs rather than taking that peanut butter approach, that broad stroke approach to HR.
So some great questions that have come in. Let's go through the prescriptions, and then we'll take some time to go through some of these.
Okay, great. So one of the first things is to make sure that you build an HR structure in a way that you are being responsive and you're working with individual departments and business units to address the specificity of their needs. One of the things that I struggle with is when we see vendors or HR practitioners operate under the assumption that when they leverage technology or build a process, they have to build it in a singular way for the organization. So if you take the example of competency management, I mean, the better approach to competency management and trying to either have one set of competencies that work for all people in the workforce, or the traditional failed initiative of trying to create functional competencies for all jobs in the organization, and that's hogwash. None of that works, and we've had a decade or two to learn from that. What we need to do is look at be much more tactical and laser-like in our approach, and go in and find those pockets in the organization that have very particular talent needs, very particular skill needs, such as IT. I've seen organizations use technology within IT organization in very creative and innovative ways to manage projects, to staff projects based on skill and competencies and experiences, et cetera. I'm sure that you think about who you want to be and not who you are. as you define any technology or process requirements, as you're doing any type of build, ensure that you're focusing on the future and not the past and not the present. One of the things we also see is that HR, because historically they have HR been a function that's been very focused on kind of the equality of the workforce and treating everyone fairly. One of the things HR has suffered from is this approach to whatever we do, we have to offer to everyone. Those days are over. Organization HR departments that will help their business differentiate from their competitors are HR departments that focus on the sum, not the all. And this, by the sum, I mean those roles, those departments, those business units, those products, those markets, those regions, which are in growth mode and are going to drive the organization forward. HR has to get it right in those pockets and not under-deliver to where the needs are most critical. And with your business differently. Find ways to spend more time with the business. I encourage HR leaders on the call to set a standard for your workforce and say at least 10% of their time should be spent at the business outside the four walls of HR, talking, engaging, and learning from the business. Their minds and their approach will shift dramatically. Lastly, really think about the fact that as you do anything, as you build processes, programs, structure your team, select technologies, deploy technologies, build change model into that. Whatever you're building today is not going to be exactly what you're going to need even 6 months from now. So ensure you have this notion of sustainability and change baked into your organization at every turn.
So one of the things that's really interesting when you look at the recast the HR functions, I mean, we've been talking about this junk forever. We say we need to do this, we say we need to get to this, et cetera, et cetera. We have a lot of people, 400 plus people on the line here, who are not at that level. I mean, they're at a level where they're actually the ones leading HR. They're the ones that are trying to convince the HR people who may be comfortable how to change. I mean, what's your advice? How do we get, I'm sick of talking about this every year. I mean, how do we get the HR people to truly align to business and focus on this versus where they're at today?
It's a great question, and a couple of the things that we encourage some of our customers to do at the non-leader level is to start asking some very provocative questions. And I've never seen someone get in trouble for asking questions. And some of those questions that I think that I've seen be very successful in our customer base are, what is HR's role in collaboration? Starting to ask that question, we start to see some interesting conversations ensue and change begin to transpire. One of the questions I think is a very interesting one is, so just ask your manager, how can I be sure that I understand what the business needs? Simple question. Let me find a way that I can get closer to the business so that I can do my job better.
What if people are doing stuff that isn't aligned?
If somebody's actually working on something that they don't believe is the right thing for the business?
Right, or that doesn't, I mean, I'm focusing on efficiency. I'm keeping the lights on, and that's all I'm doing. How do I change it? How do I get leaders to think differently?
So one of the things that we encourage our customers to do is to create cross-functional teams and really start the conversation and begin to say and invite leaders to join. But we've seen more HR change actually come from the grassroots level, not surprisingly, than necessarily from the top down. The top down, we have to see some very visionary leaders out there who are having top-down change, but more often than not, it's the right questions that are being asked. It's engaging in a dialogue to say, are we working on the right things? Is our mission? And asking for that clarity. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Completely agree. I mean, the work that we do around developing HR strategy and talent management strategy and service delivery strategy, it's with the business at the core. To start at the business and the business strategy at the core. If it starts with that, and we start asking ourselves, what does HR need to be excellent at? and for HR to be only okay at, which is bad. We're going to go much further than trying to be best at everything. When we try to be best at everything, we start with the easiest stuff. The stuff is keeping the lights on. To remodel the building, we have to start with the stuff that ties to what do we want it to look like at the end. And that's my advice, to say, how do we change this? And how do we stop talking about recasting the HR function and really thinking about how do we make the HR function into the value driver that it needs to be? I think we talked about the Agile business. We talked about how HR function needs to change, and it's going to. I mean, we're going to push the heck out of this year to make sure that it continues to change. Now, Heidi, as we get to that, one of the key things that really HR should be is it should be focused most of its efforts on talent and management. And there's a lot of really interesting questions come in just in this first 40 minutes here on talent management, and I'll just start with one of them, and this is going to lead you into your discussion on, there have been a ton of questions on what is phase one talent management. The fact that we're talking about real-time talent management, maybe you could start this by, what is phase one, and where are we at today?
Yeah, that's a question, and thank you for whoever asked it. So
there's probably been 15 people that asked it, just so you know. And it might be just for the whiteboard, but there's a lot of people that picked up on when you said phase one talent management is over.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Thank you all you 15 for asking it. So one, talent management was really the era that we've been as an industry the last 5 years, which we've been focused on the automation, optimization, and even driving effectiveness and efficiency into specific functional areas of HR. So the optimization of recruiting, the optimization of the performance management process, the optimization of onboarding, the optimization of succession planning. And that's really been where the vast majority of initiatives, efforts, and resource has been applied within phase one. Now the problem with that, and the reason and where we have come from, is what that does is it makes HR better. Absolutely, it makes HR effective. It makes HR more efficient, but it ultimately doesn't address the fundamental and the most important talent issues of the business. So there's a gap that we see between what HR has done in phase one of talent management in focusing on the effectiveness and efficiency of processes, and what businesses are looking for, which is much more around the area of driving better decisions around talent in order to address the ever-changing, ever-increasingly more fluid demand for talent across the globe.
So, is talent management still cyclical?
No, talent management is absolutely not cyclical. The organizations who think that talent management is something which you can map out across a 12-month period and have discrete things that happen once a year, twice a year, maybe quarterly basis, that notion of talent management is gone. Talent management is something that has to happen 24/7. And the good news is that we're starting to see technology vendors starting to realize this and begin to deliver platforms to the organization bring them to market, which enable two things. One, better decision support, so that you can drive information and information sets versus just transactions to really drive better decision making on a day-to-day basis. And it also enables the manager and the employee in the moment to connect, to collaborate, to provide each other feedback, to find information and knowledge, to really support the work and a notion of continual improvement on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis. Very, very different notion than where we've been in trying to optimize old-school HR processes.
Taken up the HR world of social media with one bullet: workforce not interested in retention. The buzz about this bullet. Can you explain?
Absolutely. So study after study, and I would say you don't even need to be a genius, and you don't need to even go out and look at data. I think experientially, if anyone just reflects on their own exposure to the workforce, most people, other than baby boomers and maybe some of Gen Y, are today interested in much more in deriving developmentally rich experiences and getting exposure to new opportunities and parts of the business versus retention within an organization. Some interesting statistic, and the average college graduate today will have between 10 and 14 jobs by the time they're 38. Between 10 and 14 jobs. So if you do math there, so if you graduate when you're 21, 38, 17 years later, so the average the average tenure is somewhere around 1.5 years for new college graduates, or that's the prediction. So what it means to an organization is they need to completely overhaul the way that they think about talent management and focus less on retention and more on how are we going to retain the knowledge of our workforce, share that knowledge, ensure that we're mitigating risk, that all that knowledge that's developed real time doesn't walk out the door. The people walk out the door, but you want to make sure that that knowledge doesn't walk out the door. Another important thing is that we've heard a lot about workforce planning, particularly over the last year. And I think that one of the misperceptions around workforce planning is this concept of building, a 3 to 5 year workforce plan. Any organization who thinks they can build a 3 to 5 year workforce plan at any level of granularity, I think is crazy. Work planning is very important, or what we call a talent planning is very important, but it needs to be much more real time. It needs to be at a minimum done on a quarterly basis, and it needs to be focused more around skills and what the organization is going to need in order to equip the business to meet its goals, whether that be moving into China more aggressively, moving from 4% of the overall sales being driven out of markets outside of North America to 70%, which many of our customers are moving in that direction. Based on those types of things, we need to start to look at where talent, how are we going to capture it, what does the supply look like on a global basis, what critical skills we're going to need, and build very, very fluid and agile models, not static 3 to 5 year headcount plans at a macro level, which we often see, I think, companies misconstruing as workforce planning. Other, I think, really fundamental change in the reason to talent management is talent management. We have to break down this barrier, this wall between internal and external talent. Real-time talent management means being able to go out on a day-to-day basis and look for the best person with the right skills, the right set of experiences, the right language abilities, the ability to relocate to meet the needs of the business. The more pro-centric, open a job rack and spend 3 months looking for a new hire, or simply making do with what you have is not going to work in this world today. Really need to focus on that, flexible pool of skills and competencies. Really focus on, how we really build processes and programs to move people around in a much more agile way, both internally, across business units, across functions, et cetera, as opposed to the old hierarchical view where somebody only moves if they get a promotion.
So Heidi, to do this technology plays a role. And in the latest survey with HR Executive, we talked about that. Do you want to talk about the new results that are sort of revealing here for the first time, and how people are thinking about the technology component of talent management?
Absolutely. So one of the really important things is that in order to really support the business, we at Knowledge Infusion fundamentally believe very strongly that integration is absolutely key. You need a flexible and nimble foundation on which you can build your talent processes and, more importantly, drive your decisions from an integrated set of information. And as you can see here in one of our recent surveys, 29% of respondents said that it's more important to have that integration, that is, to have the depth of functionality in one or two specific modules. So good news, that means more organizations understand the importance of integration than don't. But that being said, we would like to see and we need to all work towards increasing that number and helping to evangelize and make the case to our executives for integration over depth of functionality. Customer after customer has come to Knowledge Infusion saying, help us. We've invested in millions and millions of dollars in talent management technology, and we really aren't seeing the results that we had hoped to. And one of the biggest reasons for that is they've gone out and they've invested in 3, 4, 5, sometimes even 6 different talent management quote unquote applications, while being able to deliver the level of integration they need in order to support the business. We could do a whole webinar just on that, so I'm not going to say much more than that. But it is it's not the right model. It's the path towards having to, which is leading organizations to look to replace existing investments with a more integrated approach.
Heidi, we talked about real-time versus static. Would love to get this polling question out there and just understand. And once again, if I think of static as phase 1 and real-time as phase 2, is that okay?
Yep, that's good.
I mean, where have your talent managements been? Have they been focusing on the cyclical and let's digitize our old processes, or have they been real-time as I'm measuring, just like a manufacturing supply chain, measuring the movement of talent on a daily basis out of my competition, in out of the organization, in a new ideas and what's needed from a talent standpoint? Where has your focus been? And as we do that, Heidi, we can talk about sort of prescriptions.
Excellent. So we talked a little bit about the real-time talent planning model. One of the things I want to I encourage every single person on this phone, one of those key questions to be asking your leaders is, well, how do we know what we need to build? Simple question. How do we know what we need to go out and look for in the marketplace from a skills perspective? It's just a very provocative question, which very often will when the conversation is rich, will lead to an interesting development in this area of talent planning, which is how do we collectively, not individual centers of excellence, individual business units, but how do we collectively continue to take the pulse of the business to understand what skills, what regions, what geographies, what languages, what experiences we need in order to drive the business forward. Knowledge retention strategies. So this gets to the heart of technology. Organizations absolutely need to be laser focused on how can they leverage technology to capture knowledge, create collaboration, share knowledge, develop employees on a much more real-time basis than they have in the past. So if we rely simply on your traditional learning management system, classroom-based, or even traditional e-learning content as your primary and sole focus around knowledge transfer, you're going to miss the boat. Criticals, something that we've heard a lot about in the industry in the last couple of years, but I just want to remind those who have not yet implemented any type of critical or pivotal role model in your organization just how important that is. And the critical roles may have a shelf life of 12 months. When you define those roles which are going to have the greatest impact on the business, you need to keep it fresh. What's critical today may be very different than what's critical 12 months from now. Great example, the CEO I mentioned earlier that I had the chance to speak with yesterday mentioned that the way they're managing their business, once again, Fortune 500, they large manufacturer of electronics and components. And what they do is, as an example, the amount of production they're going to generate in China has a direct correlation of the value of the yen. If the yen falls down and it falls valuation, then they need to pull out of China and redeploy their workforce. So that's a real-time example of where things may change just in the way that how many workers they need in China versus in other markets. Change, as we all know, on a month-to-month basis. One of the other comments here that I just want to call out, because I've touched on a few of these, increasing the frequency of talent touch points. Ensure that your HR processes are not annual, are not even semi-annual. But if you take things like performance management, a talent review, any type of performance or potential evaluation, ensure that it's done frequently and that you look at coaching and feedback as a daily function and not something that you provide to your employees on an annual or even quarterly basis.
So you can see by the polling results, 71% has been stick, 5% real-time, 23% both. So 28% focusing on real-time, which is good, still 71% to go, so lots of room for improvement there.
One of the interesting stats I just want to call out, which I found actually extremely exciting in our recent survey, is that no surprise, 63% of respondents say they're leveraging social collaboration and candidate sourcing. No surprise, we've all heard a lot about that. But 9%, and this is what I found exciting, are leveraging social collaboration for performance management and 28% for learning and development. So I think that's just an extremely exciting trend, which I think is probably represented by this 5%. While it may not be the focus, it's starting to creep into HR functions, and they're starting to recognize that they need to take advantage of these collaboration platforms, whether it's an enterprise standard platform or something that's provided by your HR or talent management provider. It's something that is absolutely a necessity moving forward.
Yeah, business social collaboration to real-time talent management. Using collaboration tools to drive talent management, there's no way you're doing real-time talent management. And a very important thing for everyone to keep in mind.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so let's move on. Great discussion so far. Let's move on to question number 4, mass replacements. And there is a ton, by the way, of questions. So we're scheduled to go another 30 minutes. Because there's so many questions, we're going to go another 30 minutes after to answer questions only, just so for those that want to stay on and hear their question answered. Other meetings, we're going to keep going an extra 30 minutes, if that's okay with you, Heidi, because there's so many questions.
Absolutely.
Okay. So number 4, mass replacements, the old in with the new. Some real comments here. Most Fortune 1000 organizations are going to replace their core HR solution in the next 1 to 4 years. Once again, not trying to be a radical statement, this is the fact. We've gone from mainframe to DOS to Windows to client server to client server / browser to where we are now, through internet consumer-based solutions. We're at that inflection point where it's that time for change again. So over the next 1 to 4 years, most organizations are going to replace their core HR system. Okay. There's no doubt about that. Now, where's the focus? The focus is going to be on Unified HCM, not on just the core HR. Okay, and that's huge. That's most of the implemented last generation HR systems we did in order to make payroll work. We do it with understanding of what's needed for business agility, what's needed for the new service delivery model of HR, what real-time talent management. So the first 3 things we talked about, most systems are implemented backwards, not to even support those things. We have to get to that point. We have to get to that point where our focus is on unified HCM instead of core HR and then stuff. Blake, I know you're on the line, and I see a lot of comments coming in about people losing audio. Do you want to make any comments?
Thanks, Jason. Actually, I also just posted in the chat window, if you guys are experiencing any issue with your computer-based audio, I encourage you to dial into the backup line. The number is posted in the chat. Real quick, I'd like to also give it to you. It's 877-668-4493. The access code is 920-062-877#. Jason.
Oh, cow. What do we do? Break the technology break, Blake?
With a little over 400 people and close to 100 questions, we might have.
So sorry about that. For those of you that are having problems. For those of us who are new to HR, what is HCM? It just popped in front of my face, Janice, so I had to answer it. HCM is human capital management. How do I manage my human capital versus focus on my HR? Okay, as a department, human capital management is a strategy. Department, human capital management is a strategy. Global considerations first. Where in the past we haven't been global. Today, everyone is global. Even if you do business outside the United States, you're global. The U.S. is part of the globe. You're global. Replace will create HCM solutions that support payroll function, not vice versa. Not payroll first, then maybe we'll do talent management. Talent management first, then maybe we'll be able to use that solution to do payroll. There's other ways to do payroll than ERP systems. So all phase one replacements will change HR service delivery forever. Phase one must include direct access, or what some of you are thinking about, self-service. That you're wasting elegant technology, and you're wasting an era where people are looking for direct access and rolling out a brand new elegant technology with a terrible delivery model. And I beg you to rethink that. And software as a service, as we know, is the preferred delivery model for a majority of these replacements. So, question for you all, just to see if we're right or wrong. Do you plan to examine or replace your HR platform over the next 3 years? Yes, no, already did. As you're voting on that simple poll, let's talk about the prescriptions. The prescription on mass replacements is now. Now. You recreate your HR technology strategy now and plan for the next 3 years. And recreate means recreate based on us coming out of the worst recession we've been in the last 40 years during technology era. We must re-architect the HR service delivery base, this whole concept of HR service delivery based on now gen, not next gen. We're in an era where people expect information pushed to them. It's not a, oh, cool, we rolled out self-service. We expect this. Your management strategy must be part of your core. There are then talent management. There's unified human capital management, and they have to talk and work together. And the impact of software as a service. There is an impact. It doesn't mean you get rid of IT. It doesn't mean you don't need IT support. There are a ton of different things that software as a service means to you as far as how you have to think about your processes, how you have to think about change management, how you think about your strategy, how you think about reporting. In thinking about any sort of decision around placement, which 82% of you are, understand the impact of those, and only change management and business case efforts to drive this funding. Okay? Rip and replace, this whole concept of rip and replace. Eat it. Rip means you're thinking about ripping out something you have and replacing it with something that's going to do something similar. We're in an era of rip and create. Rip, create. We have to create a different environment for HR and have to create a different setting for HR people to leverage the technologies. I think to that. Okay, you don't want to add anything to that. Let's move on to the next one. Impact of SaaS and cloud computing for HR. Now, this concept of SaaS and cloud computing, it's all people are talking about. My 7-year-old and my 4-year-old say, what are these ads for the clouds? These ads out everywhere for the clouds. Loud. This is out there. This is the world. You can't go a day without seeing someone talk about clouds. You can't go a day without someone talking about software as a service. Today, where we're at in 2012, is software as a service is the preferred delivery method for all HR solutions for the first time ever. Period. There is no doubting this. You've said this. I'm going to share a slide in a second. You said this. SaaS is the preferred delivery model today. The IT continue to support that. IT wants to be able to focus on things that drive competitive advantage. Now, someday IT is going to realize that HR does once we shift HR to human capital management. But IT is not putting their efforts toward writing code, writing reports, wanting software as a service as well, once they get over some of their concerns around security. HR's dependence on customizations needs to end and focus on flexibility and configuration. realize that some of the processes they have been around for 40 to 50 years. And that they're that way is because someone who doesn't even work there thought they were a good idea back then. Configure the software to meet the needs of the HR functions where you can just be okay. Think about configuration around areas around true specialization. Where you want to beat and kill your competition. That's where you really need to think about the difference. Integration between cloud solutions becomes much more difficult, and that's going to continue to drive us towards unifications, suites. And the agility of the solutions required to support business of 2012 and beyond. You have to buy and place your solutions with things that are going to support this number one prediction we made, which is business agility. 18 months to do an upgrade. $3 million to get new functionality. There's back up the bus 10 people. Upgrade. That's far from agile. We have to have the agility in our technology to support that. As you can see, the survey that we'll be releasing with HR Executive, we see 6%, and sorry, the legend's a little off there, 6% per software as a service, 25% on-premise, 26% no preference, 13% hosted by a third party. I think Heidi has rejoined us from her period with the mute button put. So Heidi, do you want to make a comment here?
Yeah, absolutely, and apologies for the mute earlier. So one of my pet peeves and things that I think is sometimes vendors actually do a disservice to the HR buyer is I think there's this misperception that the delivery model, the platform, doesn't matter to HR, that it's really an IT decision, whether you go with on-premise or SaaS, et cetera. The fact is there are huge, huge differences for the HR function and huge, huge advantages of software as a service or cloud-based technology for the HR buyer. And every single HR practitioner at every level is a recipient of some of the benefits of. So the three big things that I always talk about with our customers are speed, innovation, and independence and flexibility of the HR function. So the three things, if you keep those in mind and they become your mantra for building your case for a SaaS-based or cloud-based solution, speed, innovation, and independence and flexibility for the function, really critical to building any business case and really critical for you to understand why and how SaaS will impact the way that you operate and the way that you're able to deliver to the business moving forward.
I'd love to hear yes, no, and love to get some questions on this in a few minutes. But mine, and it's very, very important. And, I want to make sure that we say, for the first time, SaaS is that preferred delivery model. We knew this was going to happen. We knew it was going to happen. It is now this way. It's going to continue to go this way as other back office technologies. The question is that's where we have to get to. A great question that just came in as I get to my results here around how do we continue to get away from customizations. How to move past the 80-20 rule. We celebrate. In a room, we have governance and say, guys, we don't all need our own process to do X. We do the same thing with 6 steps across all of the business versus 4 steps here, 7 steps here, and 3 steps here. That's not driving competitive advantage. We get to the concept of handheld devices. We all know, and a great example, Apple released their earnings yesterday. Apple's earnings, they actually sold more iPads than HP sold laptops last quarter. Apple sold more iPads than HP sold laptops last quarter. So handheld devices is only going to continue to grow. And it means it must be part of our HR technology strategy. This is not any different than when the phone was invented. This is different than when the fax machine was invented. This is another form of technology that we need to include in our overall strategies. So work with IT to partner portfolio. What do I mean? It means when we get some of these things around security, on-premise support, et cetera, work with IT to partner, or work with us, for goodness sakes. We worked with organizations to help them get through these things where IT initially said no, and it had to make more sense. Cannot just replace one piece of the HR portfolio. This is really key. Putting in a SaaS-based solution is like open heart surgery. To have it react is huge. Best SaaS technology placed in an infrastructure that isn't ready to support it equals reaction. Very, very key to understand. Be educated on the pros and cons of SaaS. Realize it's not a rip and replace situation. It's much more complex than that. This is a new way of doing business. And build BYOD. Everyone's BYOB, right? Bring your own beverage. BYOD. Bring device. Bring your own device must be built into all future HR technology strategies. Now, another key component that goes into this is implementations. Okay, so we've got the best technology in the world, and we have the best technology in the world being created for the human capital management space today, period. Now, one of the problems is that we're still implementing it the way we implemented the old stuff. We haven't learned from the sins of our past, and we're still counting on the technology way too much to solve our problems. So let you talk about section number 6 here, depth of implementations.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jason. So we just talked about the significant advantages of SaaS-based and cloud-based solutions. But one of the things that we see, and as Jason said, there's a very, very high risk of organ rejection or platform rejection, or I'll even call it application rejection. And I'm using that term application by design. And one of the reasons for that, the focus on simply what tool we use is really only going to get you probably to the 10-yard line. The risk, for any of you who watched the games last week, and I can't believe I'm actually using a football analogy, Jason, the risk of that fumble. You have the ball, or you have your new SaaS-based technology, and you fumble. You don't necessarily have the right approach to what you're going to do with that solution. You haven't thoughtfully looked at how is it going to integrate into the rest of your HR technology stack. And the risk is that you take a very application-focused or application-centric to an implementation. Or you lift and shift and you take what worked for you when you implemented PeopleSoft, you implemented Oracle, or you implemented SAP or Lawson or Ultimate, et cetera, and you lift and shift that and then put it onto your new technology. In addition, one of the big problems with implementations today is that most of us who have grown up in the HR space, most of our exposure to implementations has been based on based on the audience of the HR function. The audience of HR technology today is the workforce. It's candidates, it's executives, it's managers, it's employees, and lastly, very lastly, it's HR. So knowing that the technology has shifted, the audience has shifted, it's fundamental to any solid tech deployment is a focus on outcomes, not go live. So organizations need to really begin to focus on what are we trying to deliver to the business, and absolutely laser focused on that as they move forward with their deployment. And the standard and traditional implementation model is very much focused on speed to go live and turn on the system. I've had the tremendous opportunity in the last few weeks to spend a lot of time with vendors in our space. And one of the common themes that was just echoed over and over again by both their customers as well as the vendors themselves is this need to focus on what I'm calling phase 2, which is really how do we address the sins of the past and ensure that our customers who, in a SaaS-based model, have the opportunity to make the decision every 3 to 5 years as to whether they're going to renew. How do we ensure that they're really getting true value out of the solution? And that requires an entirely new way of thinking about deploying technology. Applications and tool-based approach where you simply want to turn it on, run water through the pipes, flip the switches, take your existing processes, take your data from your old system and simply port it into the new system. I can guarantee you you're not going to be delivering incrementally significant value to the business. So what are some of the things that need to change? We need to become much more rapid and develop a much more iterative approach to deployments. We need to think about technology as a perpetual beta. We had a question come in, which I thought was great, which we certainly have found SaaS solutions modular, but the problem is, and we're crippled by how good the vendor is. SaaS vendors certainly have a long ways to go to meet some of the same standards of control. Great question. One of the keys to a successful deployment, which is very different than an implementation, is in this building in a sustainability model, which means upfront determining how are you as an organization going to manage the change that comes every 3 to 4 months with a new release with cloud-based technology. So really beginning to think of deployments as much more iterative, as a much more dynamic and fluid set of technologies and capabilities to ensure that you're growing along with the vendor, to ensure that you're not just simply focused on turning on an application in a siloed-based function, but looking across your HR technology portfolio and ensuring the proper level of business process and technology integration is built. To have that framework, you're building the wiring across solutions, ensuring that every decision you make, from the content that you put into your solutions, from how you transform your business processes, to the outputs from those solutions and the reports and analytics you're going to be generating from solutions are at the core, that those decisions are driven at the core by what is the business outcome you're driving toward. And far too often, those decisions are based on how quickly we can go live versus on what value are we trying to deliver to the business. So really, it's an inversion of the model that's needed in order for us as an industry to really be able to tap into the incredible power that today's technologies can afford. Next one. So a couple of some interesting statistics that have come in from our recent survey. One of the questions we asked is, how significant are the following challenges to managing your organization's talent effectively? And as you can see, some very, very significant challenges having nothing to do with the technology. The biggest challenge that was cited, the biggest challenge is that our processes are antiquated or inefficient, we don't have the right data, our managers don't know how to manage people, we don't have the money to invest. And behind those things was we don't have the right technology. So interestingly enough, it's really many of these, I'm going to use the word softer things, but they're actually even more important than the actual technologies you select, are holding organizations back today from being able to really move their organizations forward and derive value and create value through their technology. So what we encourage is a very, very holistic approach to deployments. If you notice, I'm using the words implementation and deployment very, very deliberately. Knowledge Infusion does not. We don't utilize the word implementation. Implementation really smacks of technology only, which makes it's a very technology-centric way to deploying a solution. And we use the word deployment of technology because it includes the people, process, and technology change in order to derive the value and the outcomes that you're looking for. In fact, so much so, when we build strategies for our customers and then we move into helping them execute those strategies, we use the rule of thumb of 40-40-20, that 40% of resource and change comes in the area of process change, 4% of change and investment comes in the area of people change, and 20% technology. And unfortunately, far too often organizations I think really invest and underestimate the importance of the people and process, and very surprised by the fact that they're not deriving the true value from the solutions that they are looking for long term. So the things that you can be doing in order to address this challenge around how you can move your organization from implementations to deployment. First of all, learn from the sins of the past. The sins of the past is really what I'm going to call the last 5 years, where we've had very much a whack-a-mole approach to implementing technologies. So we know that we have an antiquated, as an example, an antiquated recruiting system. We're going to go out and we're going to buy a best of breed, which is most functionally rich, and is going to satisfy our recruiters and our head of recruiting. We go select that technology, and we lift and shift our current process into that new technology, and we turn it on, and we build minimal integration between a core HR system and to simply bring the new hire baseline, basic employee and personal census-like type information into the core HR system. That's an example of the sins of the past. That's an example of an organization who 6-12 months later is questioning whether or not they're getting the value out of the solution that they had thought they were going to get and promised when they built business case, when they did the vendor demos, et cetera. So reflect on your behaviors and think about how you can change moving forward. And part of this is it's not so the word system integrator. Most of you are probably familiar with that term. Deployment is not system integration. It's not about implementing a technology. It's not about integrating technologies. It's about executing a strategy in order to drive those outcomes. And you have to focus just as much on the people and process components as the technology. One of the things that we get a question on, and my guess is we'll probably get some of these questions, is what is a business outcome and how do you define them? Since I say that's incredibly important. So this outcome is not an HR outcome. One thing I find a lot of HR practitioners struggle with is how we define outcomes truly in business terms. And tying back to our trend number 2, which is recasting the HR function, to determine what these outcomes are, you have to get outside the 4 walls of HR. Nobody who spends all of their time just within HR, I think, reasonably can be expected to defining true business outcomes. So business outcomes are things such as increasing global mobility. It's things such as increasing the time to market in emerging markets. And what that means is you need to demonstrate and build the case and show how we need to have a nimble and agile insight into our internal and external talent pools to be able to identify and therefore move the talent that we need. It also might mean increasing the output and the productivity of the workforce. In order to do that, you're going to need very, very rich information coming from your HR system and combining it with operational data. So think about that, combining it with operational data. Be at the core of how you think about planning and deploying your solutions. Imagine and create a sustainability plan before deployment, not once phase 1 is complete. Far too often we see organizations struggle with this. Oh, wow. How do we keep up with the rapid cycle of releases and innovation from the vendors? You have to build sustainability on 2 fronts. Sustainability to manage new releases, sustainability to manage business change. That has to be baked into your deployment model, or once you go live, you'll begin to struggle. And realizing that the old HRS function will not support modern deployments. The old HRIS function, at its very core in DNA and mission, was designed very, very differently with a different agenda. We actually encourage our customers to, kill the term HRIS, brand their team, and restructure the skills and roles within their HR process and technology team to really support modern deployments. Jason?
So
comment?
Yeah, my comment is, we said that most people are going to replace their HR systems in the next 1 to 4 years. Implementations today are still being done the way they have been done in the past. We have 1 to 4 years to change this. If we don't change this in the next 1 to 4 years, HR will never be able to provide that value. Never. So this is all, at least this is all that we live and breathe for right now. And this point should be as important as any point we've talked about throughout this whole presentation. best business agility strategy, the best talent management strategy, the best software in the world. Implement it the way you've implemented things in the past, and the way that we have implemented things in the past. You would be any better off than you were with old technology. You agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to actually go out on a limb here, and I know, Jason, you and I have talked a lot about this, and we said we're not sure if the market's ready to hear it, but I'll say it anyhow. Because there's going to be so many replacements, because technology has changed so significantly and the possibilities are so great, and because businesses need something so tremendously different than they did 5, 10, 15 years ago, I'm out on a limb to say that if HR doesn't do this and doesn't shift the way from the old implementation to a deployment model, I think we may see an era where we start to see business deployments and starting to see lines of business take over the management of their talent.
It's happening. I mean, look at Salesforce acquisition of Ripple. Look at how close that is to having the VP of Sales driving performance reviews that are different than what the HR organization is doing. It's that close. I mean, if you can't taste it, I mean, it's real close. So we have to get it right this time.
Any VP of Sales, VP of Marketing, VP of Production and Manufacturing, anyone that we've talked to, and Jason and I spent a lot of time talking with business leaders, every single one of them, if they were offered a very robust solution that they had greater control over than the HR function, and they could do it directly because they know how essential and critical talent is to meeting their business needs, would jump all over it.
Great. Awesome questions, you guys. Keep them coming because we're going to go to these next ones real quick and then go into questions. Data. So, some key things. We have more data than ever. Okay, you might not have more data within your HR system than ever, which I wouldn't be surprised on, but you have access to more data than ever. You've heard me say LinkedIn and Facebook know more about your employees than you do. Your competitors know more about your employees than you do because they actually can use LinkedIn to look for your people. You might not be able to. More data than ever. In message, text message, social collaboration, all that data, what do you do with it? And the term big data is just that. Big is the combination of my transactional data plus all of my social data to start to be able to really use data to drive business decisions. Must integrate. Okay, must integrate between HR processes. One of the sad things, and I really mean this, one of the saddest things around ERPs, ERP deployments, is we've done a better job of integrating our ERP HR system to our ERP financial system, than our ERP HR system amongst itself. And that we'll get HR to human capital management if we don't do that. So we have to think about all of this data and understand what can we use. What terms we use is MAD, metrics, analytics, and dashboards. That will get. They don't care to send them a PDF with a one-dimensional report. They want to understand metrics, analytics, and dashboards, and they need to understand they first of all understand that it's real. Second of all, make sure that there's data governance in place so they don't question it because they're asking a question of the data being right or wrong. Which is into that last bullet, which is standardization of HR data is the only way to actually drive this HR metrics, analytics, and dashboard. So you have an HR data strategy, meaning you have a data dictionary that every one of your HR systems uses and follows. So prescription here. First of all, create that strategy. Inventory all of your people data and enterprise people data strategy. Make metrics, analytics, dashboards part of every one of your HR initiatives. If it's not, why are you doing it? And dashboards is the goal of all deployments. So we'll say, let's put in our new system and analytics second. You never will. You're not putting it in a way where you're ever going to get to them. In order to analytics, you have to think analytics at the beginning. Small, little things that are going to get people going. And finally, you have to build a storytelling function into the HR function. When people said, there's been a number of questions about rebranding HRIS. HRIS is not the people that run reports. You don't need IT support to find a song. You need storytelling, and where HRIS needs to play and transform to. The last is business social. We call business social casual. We've got formal dress. We've got casual dress. Middle of that, casual. We have formal communication. We have casual communication. Middle of that, business social. Business social. The world is social today. Everything is social. I begged you to like us on Facebook. Go look right now, since you're doing things while you're listening to us. Type in Knowledge Infusion and like us. We're going to talk about this. Collaboration is a proven key to agility and business success. There's no one that argues this. If you're collaborating, you're driving success. Business social is not an option. Business social is required going forward. Is HR going to prevent it, or is HR going to embody it? That don't adopt this whole concept of business social will lack that competitive advantage in real-time nature. The ground between formal and casual in all communication. So for everyone who says we're not going to let people use Facebook or LinkedIn, or we're not going to use Ripple, or we're not going to use Yammer, or we're not going to use SharePoint because someone's going to say the wrong thing. Say the wrong thing in email. People can say the wrong thing on the telephone. This is not any different. People say the wrong thing to the form of communication that comes out. Mental telepathy. Different. Social technology is no different than any other technology in the past. Rule apply. You're going to have to make a case for get people that don't follow the rules, and you're going to have to build policies around it, just like you do today for the use of email, the use of internet, and the use for phone. But don't block it. Every year you block it, you fall 3 years behind. What's the prescription? Become involved. Every organization is thinking about business social today. Make HR part of it. Why should HR be part of it? HR is responsible for driving engagement. Drives retention. Engagement drives development. Engagement drives the whole concept of managing my human capital. Don't let he do it alone. Meet your goals. Social into all of your HR service delivery efforts and analytical efforts. When you put a report, you want people to comment on it. When transactions, you want people's feedback. Don't shout dumb, one-dimensional things, and hopefully people will get you out of it. Get talking. Utilize business social and create groundswell. You that are in the create a Yammer group today. Go to yammer.com, create a Yammer group, and invite some people, and start collaborating. Okay, to start using business social. But if you fall off business social, or if you let someone in your organization tell you we're never going to be business social, I hate to say it, but you're comping out. You end up hurting your organization much more down the road. Need up a fight to make sure that happens within the organization. So Heidi, we went through that fast, and you guys, for those of you on the line, you see my email address, Heidi's email address. You see my email or my Twitter handle. You see Heidi's Twitter handle. We're going to leave these up, and I'd ask you on the line to go into Twitter and follow us. Go email, let us know what you thought of this event. There's going to be a survey at the end also. And we'll turn it back over to you. I'll let you decide how we do the survey and then open up to the 200 questions or so that have come in during this event.
Sure. For those of you that cannot hang on the line, we appreciate you guys taking the time to join us. And by the sheer interaction of everybody that participated, that this was a very relevant webinar and topic. And those of you that can't hang on the line, you will receive an email with instructions on how to download both the slides as well as a link to the replay. So more importantly, for those of you that had some issues with audio, there will be a replay link that will be emailed to you that you can share with your colleagues and teams. And with that, Jason, I don't know if you guys have had an opportunity to jump through some of these questions, but maybe we can get started on some of those.
I'm just going to start, and Heidi, I'm going to let's just start here. And you guys, some of these are going to be really, really interesting, and I'm not going to call out names unless you guys want me to. If you guys want your name read, let me know. But some of these are great. Why does business social get so much buzz when so many industries still run brick and mortar? Social is just a new way of. This is just a new way of talking. No matter whether you're brick and mortar, whether you're virtual, where you're, what part of your world. I'm going to be giving a speech in Dublin, Ireland next week, where 95% of the people want to hear about business social as their number one thing they want to hear about. Ability to communicate, and collaboration is new business success. No matter what type of business you're in, that's what's the buzz. And proven, it drives engagement, and with 75% of the workforce be Gen Y or greater or new in 5 years, this is how they communicate. Think about taking away phone. Think about taking away email. It doesn't work. It's getting so much buzz. It's the future of how we work. Do you want to add anything to that, Heidi?
Yeah, the interesting thing is brick and mortar companies or brick and mortar industries today are still very global in nature. They're still very, very, I won't necessarily say virtual, but have very distributed workforces. One of our retail customers, who's a Fortune 500 company, will stand up, and the CEO will testify to this as well, and say that business social is the number one thing that's enabled them to increase customer satisfaction. Business social is the number one thing that has driven to higher levels of customer satisfaction, and that's because of their ability to communicate and collaborate across a very distributed workforce, across their stores. So I think it's very important. In every industry, it looks a little bit different in terms of where and how to apply the value for that business social can provide, but I don't think brick and mortar is any different than any other industry.
Heidi, I'll take this and I'll ask you to jump in. How do you rebrand HRIS, and what does this mean to full outsourcing? You guys, HRIS is not a support function. HR is not a support function. HRIS is a strategic function. By name, HRIS, it doesn't sound strategic. Which all HRIS organizations do, and all HR organizations to do, is to rebrand themselves HR Process and Technology. The Process and Technology Organization, or HR Solutions. For the type that to me, thank you. What does it mean? Is that in that function, I don't have developers, I don't have coders, I don't have database administrators, I have business analysts. I have to understand what the business outcomes I'm trying to drive towards. I have change management people. I have marketing people. I have to truly understand what is the business and HR is trying to do and how I align a strategy to that. HR is something you still need to support these things. That's a different function. HR Process and Technology sits at the HR strategy table. It sits at the HR executive table. It's responsible for data governance. It's responsible for change management, overall visioning, or how all these things integrate together, and make sure that prioritization amongst all of the HR function to drive this. The other part of that question, well, what does this mean to full outsourcing? It really, I don't actually think it means anything to full outsourcing. Whether you're outsourcing, in-housing, right sourcing, housing, whatever it is, you still need to have this function. When you still need to make sure process and technology is understood. One of the misnomers about outsourcing and full outsourcing is if I do that, my lift and shift, someone else is going to take care of me. That's crap. You have the same amount of HR process and technology support whether you're in-housing or out-housing. Heidi?
Here's another interesting question that I want to make sure that we address. If the introduction of cloud-based services makes switching less of an odorous task, what is the new expectation that vendors should focus on to create long-term relationships? So I think this gets at the heart of implementations versus deployments, and I think one of the exciting things is that vendors are beginning to recognize that simply by turning customers on and making them quote-unquote live is not going to yield the long-term value that their customers are expecting to receive out of the solutions they're deploying. And if they don't receive that value, they're going to look elsewhere. So the expectation of your vendor should be to work with them to ask for support or referrals to organizations to help support the full deployment of their solution, not simply the implementation of an application. So it's a very, very different paradigm, and you should expect vendors to be responsive to that. We're building relationships with vendors. They're coming to us on a regular basis saying, get it, you're building strategies, Knowledge Infusion. How can you help our customers execute the strategies, leveraging our technology in order to drive outcomes and truly create value? It's all about value as opposed to go live. And it's only through that value will you be able to justify keeping those as a service contracts in place, and only when vendors understand that will they be able to get those renewals from their customers they need to stay in business. Jason?
Interesting question. Are there specific HCM solutions and providers that you feel are leading the way? And this is it's a really interesting question. When you look at where the world is going, and you look at where the technology world is going, and you see that software as a service is driving that direction. What you have to do is you have to look at vendors that are continuing to push the envelope, that are continuing to look at the world of software as a service differently, and realize that it's different, and continuing to think that they're going to push this talent management envelope into a different direction. What we do at Knowledge Infusion is we help organizations deploy strategies. From a technology standpoint, technology is a small part of deploying a strategy. Okay. Part of that, what we've done is we've actually chosen two vendors that we feel are leading the way in helping organizations drive strategies best. Two are Workday and SuccessFactors. Success now being a part of SAP. Now, there are other vendors that are out there doing transformative things. There are other vendors that are out there doing really, really cool things. But as far as when we lead the way is a misnomer. And, people from, like Heidi and I coming from PeopleSoft, PeopleSoft was rated the #1 HR solution in the world. At the end of the day, people said your product sucked. So leading the way doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense to me the way the question is asked. But what we do is we look at organizations who are truly being successful in executing strategy. And the solutions today that we feel are doing that are Workday and SuccessFactors based on what it is that you're trying to do. Heidi, do you want to add to that?
I think you hit on all of the key points, and it's funny because we do get that question a lot, and they say, Knowledge Infusion, you're an agnostic firm. How can you say things like that? We have a very interesting take on agnosticism, and that is we absolutely believe that there are solutions which make our customers and will continue to make our customers more successful than others. So it's something that we're very vocal with our customers in helping them understand that based on all of the things Jason and I just talked about for the last hour and 40 minutes, based on all of these things in the direction we think business needs to go, there are solution providers that get it more than others, that have the management team and the foundational platform in place to really be able to take their customers forward.
And the cool thing about that, and back to the question that was asked, and I really appreciate that question, is we change that all the time. See the vendors change, and as we see the vendors change their focus, you on the vendors that are going to be successful in doing that, ones that have live customers, the ones that have proven success, et cetera, are going to change. But once again, those are the ones that are leading the way today. Now, when you look at talent acquisition, and you look at hourly workforce around talent acquisition, I'm going to tell you Taleo and Connexa are leading the way. Okay, two vendors that are very, very good at specific things. So, it's important when we look at this, we have to understand what's most important to your business. Now, if I take a step back to what we said earlier, that means what does HR want to be excellent at? et cetera, et cetera, and that could change how you answer with such a question. But look at overall, we see vendors that are truly leading the way and other vendors that are saying, hey, we're good at certain things, which is cool. We all need different products for a lot of different things. Those are two that I would say are leading the way and truly driving human capital management on a holistic basis. Another question that has come out that I think is really interesting. Can you comment on how HRIS function is adequate for today's modern deployments? I think we talked about that to a degree. Anything you want to add to that?
I think just the one thing to remember is the span of control and the mission of the function just has to explode. The walls have been far too narrowly defined, and I think if you have any level of vision in your senior HR leader, I think a conversation with them will, and you can help paint the possibilities and the vision of how you can better support their mission. I think that is the kind of first step forward to creating that new mission.
I like this question, and thank you for answering it, Kelly. How do you help the organization make the switch from quick fix mentality, process metrics, et cetera, to overall evaluation of what we're doing now, and we should be doing X instead? I love that. I love that question. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that is fantastic. And while it's a really dumb term, it's the whack-a-mole approach that we see organizations take. I'd be a big fan of that game and beat anyone I ever play at. But that's what we play against. But that's what I see organizations unfortunately falling prey to, where something pops up in the business and so it becomes a hot topic, and suddenly they're expecting HR to react, and so they wet it. They go out and they take path of what they believe is least resistance, and go out and they select a solution and a technology, and they implement it, thinking that somehow that mole is not going to pop back up somewhere else. And in fact, the fundamental root cause of what they're trying to address and what they're hearing from the business is still there. And that whacking that mole doesn't fix the problem. So one of the things that we feel, or I'd say the most important thing to stop your organization from that behavior, is really building that strategy. Having a framework that's going to drive decisions so that when there are things that pop up, as they always will, you can come back to your strategy. And that strategy may need to shift. As we just talked about, business is agile. Where the direction that your business is going today may look very different 6 months from now. But your strategy that you can come back to, that is very thoughtful, that's been very well thought out in terms of what are you trying to deliver to the business collectively based on the needs for the future workforce, as opposed to then being reactive. And if you have that framework in place, it's ever seen an organization fail to push back on reactive behavior and say, let's come back to our strategy, and do we need to shift our strategy and therefore react? Is it big enough, or is the strategy that we have in place the right strategy, and we need to take our time as we proceed towards addressing the mole pops up?
Heidi, there's another question. I need to say this. There's another question that came in, and people, too many actually, that came to me from in private about what about Oracle Fusion HCM. You guys, I want to make sure that I was clear in my question and clear in one thing. Technology is never going to solve this problem. Based on how most of us use technology today, 99% of the solutions out there today will meet the needs. The question is, do you see Oracle Fusion HCM as being a leader in the space? Of course. Oracle is the leading technology company from an enterprise application space in the world. Is Oracle Fusion HCM going to be a leader? Of course it is, because they've got generations of HR products that people are going to move to. Now, does that mean it's going to be able to drive business results better or worse? No. Does it mean it's the right fit for you? Yes, no, no. It doesn't. It's open. I mean, you have to figure out what's best and what's fit into your organization best. I guess I want to make sure the point that we drive out of this is that the technology doesn't matter as much. Okay, which is that you understand your business strategy, how agile does it need to be, you understand your HR and talent management strategies, and determine what type of technology best meets that need. I mean, a car is a car is a car is a car is a car. We all drive different kinds of cars, and we all drive different kinds of cars for reasons, and we all call them leaders. Every single car out there has the label Motor Trend Truck of the Year, Midsize SUV of the Year, Car of the Year. We don't say there's a vehicle leader. There's leaders by category. One thing that's important to understand is Oracle HCM Fusion is going to be a leader. Is it the solution? Who knows? Today, we don't have the customers that these other solutions have. Therefore, it doesn't come up on our list as a vendor that we see can be easily deployed quickly based on better practice or based on your own practices. Now, might that change in 6 months? It probably will. Do you want to add anything?
I think you covered it all. I think sometimes there's almost too much importance put on the technology. To Jason's point,
all the time. There's too much. All the time. I mean, we spend more time talking about vendors than we do process change. In like shows, we're spending way too much time on the technology.
Yeah. And things I always find interesting is when we work with an organization and help them build out their strategy, the very next thing that they will often ask us for help with is helping them select the right technology. To me, success would be when our customers start to say, how can you help us execute this strategy, being just as mindful of the process and people change as the technology change, and knowing that technology is not the panacea. The technology is purely a dumb shell, which when used well and smartly and filled with rich and meaningful content and rolled out and launched to the workforce in meaningful ways, and when HR can be a steward to help the business derive meaningful information from that technology, then and only then will the strategy be executed. And that's the shift that we're trying to create in the industry. And so therefore, yes, technology is a critical enabler, and yes, there are technologies and vendors that get it more than others. But that alone, the difference between solutions today is not the number one driver of success in our customer base and where we think the future is.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Heidi. Another question I love. I suppose everyone recognizes the need for change management, but no one does well, is people don't really know what it means. Once again, brilliant question.
That's the question of the day.
Yeah. So when you look at that, you're spot on. No one knows what it means, A, but B, changing. Okay. And what's important is that if you're doing change management on technology deployment, what's it going to be? It's going to be changing a technology, often shift of a technology. You don't do change management on your technology deployment. Change management on your strategy deployment. HR function is going to do and be strategically in the future. That's where you apply your change management to. Why should my employees believe that they should do these things themselves versus someone else doing them for them? Why should they put in the employee profile? Why should they that they're not calling HR but looking online for information? I mean, the change management is what drives the success of any of these solutions. What's becoming a bigger deal, you guys, is that in the past, my change management efforts, I could just focus on 1%. I hate the whole 99%, 1% thing, but I could focus on the 1%, the one for the people in HR. In this world, I have to focus on the 99%, and the percent is the entire workforce. When I do that, I have a workforce that's made up of different types of people, different types of roles, different generations, different technology, technographics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Change management and communication is 10 times harder. So to answer your question, I hope you're still on, when you look at that, the technology is, we don't do change management on technology. We do change management on strategy. We do change management on process. And change management does not equal training. Change is almost more marketing than it is training, an area where HR is specifically not that great. Think to that?
Yeah, I think one simple rule of thumb is also to, as you manage the change around the execution of a strategy or the deployment of a technology, you have to remember not to manage change around the tool. It's not the tool. Anytime you start to communicate, message, brand a tool, that's when you're going to get that organ rejection. What you have to do is you have to be messaging, communicating, branding, training on a new business solution. So you have to be able to articulate to that each audience in their own language what's in it for them. So executives, business leaders, different demographics, different countries, regions of the world are going to be deriving different value from a solution that you're rolling out, and it's a business solution, and what's in it, what about their world is going to change and be made better by the deployment of the new solution. And that's what you have to be able to fundamentally answer. And I challenge anyone who says, well, we can't really answer that, that's hard, then it's probably an ill-fated initiative. If you can't truly articulate it, what's in it for executives, for managers, for candidates, for employees, for different regions of the world, then you're probably not going to be able to derive the adoption or the quality of information coming into the system that's going to enable you to meet your ultimate goals with the solution.
Thanks, Heidi. There's more question that I think is important, and I think it's probably a good one to end on, since I hate answering questions for people that aren't even on the line anymore. But you have any ideas to assist HR in getting the business to see them as a partner rather than a hurdle or roadblock? I think that when we tie that back to the whole concept of Agile Business, where we started this whole discussion, I think that's a great way to end it.
That's a fantastic question, and thank you to whoever asked that. The first thing that I would encourage you to do is to look at new engagement models with the business. I think one of the mistakes that HR makes is that they're not engaging with the business at the right point in time, which means inserting themselves into the business planning process. I think that's a very, very critical point that HR has to participate in. And it's very interesting, as I spend a lot of time with HR business partners and business leaders, it's a lot of our consulting is creating some vision around what's possible, and that's one of those eye-opening moments for many organizations to say, yeah, that's exciting. We could and should, at every critical juncture as we develop our annual business plan and as we adapt it throughout the year, ensure that we have HR at the table creating the talent plan to enable that business strategy. Sounds like a no-brainer, but far too few organizations do it. So I think that's the seed, that's the starting point, where if you can insert HR at that point in time into critical meetings and those events. And I would do it in a way, and this is getting very tactical, but it's extremely helpful, which includes a very formal and very template approach to plan your talent, so that the business leaders and trust, that you can create that trust in the business leaders. You're going to generate, by sitting there and being in those meetings, you're going to generate something very meaningful and tangible for them to help them meet their business goals. That's one really critical way to kind of explode the current model. And then I think the other thing, which if you're not a leader or you're not an HR business partner, might be something that's easier for you to accomplish, and that is create business advisory groups for any major initiative, whether it be transforming processes, selecting a technology, deploying a technology, developing change messages, anything that you're working on. Create a business advisory group and embed them into your program structure. Ensure that they are at the core of your upfront analysis and the definition of what is the need, what is the problem we're trying to solve, and with you all the way through to roll out, so that they're keeping you honest to ensure that change management messages, your launch strategies, the information, metrics, analytics, and dashboards that you're deriving from your solutions are actually truly delivering what they need and not just what HR thinks they need.
Oh, thanks for that. So I know I said we're done, but there's someone that actually made the comment. Those of us that are still on are enjoying your time and hearing the responses to other questions, which is funny. Maybe we could just do this all day. I know that.
Well, we have other meetings to move on.
I know that would screw up our list. But there's there's another question that I saw that I really want to get to here, and it's, in this brave new world, how do you see the roles and and responsibilities divided between HR and IT. And I think that, another really important comment when it ties back into what I just talked about when it comes to the business, the role of HR is to understand the HR strategy. The role of HR process and technology, that group, is really understand what the HR function is trying to do, understand where the data sits, understand where exactly I'm trying to take the HR function, and make sure that I'm the filter. I know we have I'm amazed how we still have 165 people on listening to us. But for those of you who don't understand, the filter, the coffee filter between the HR function, which is so aligned to the business, and IT. Fortunately, what happens in so many cases is HR just hands things to IT. IT prioritizes themselves. IT prioritizes based on the technology they have. IT prioritizes based on what they think is important. And what's happening is HR comes back and says, you did our needs. You're not our needs. Or there's 10 people in HR going to IT with some requests. IT is trying to meet all of them. They're getting bogged down and they're doing everything not meet needs. The roles and responsibilities are HR sets the strategy. HR owns HR technology strategy. Owns that. IT supports it and enables it. Okay, that's a really important distinction. HR owns it because it has to be prioritized. It has to be tied back to business outcomes, and then HR has to say, okay, IT, here's what I need. And this way, I need my outcomes to be this. I need it to tie the strategy to be this. Help me choose my vendors that make the most sense. Help me choose the partners that make the most sense to help me deploy my strategy. That's the separation. The minute that HR just thinks that they're not worthy of technology and forward to IT and gets out of the whole concept of understanding technology, chances of any form of success are really, really slim.
No, I think just maybe wrap this up by quoting one of our customers, Yahoo, who had the chance to speak yesterday, and she was speaking to a group of industry leaders, and her comment was that she's an SVP of HR, and she is really creating a call for action within her own organization around the technology acumen, really taking full accountability for not only understanding the existing technology, but what's possible with technology today, to really expanding and exploding HR's capabilities, HR's mission. And I do think that technology today has the opportunity to just change what's possible, change what the mission of HR is, and change what we can deliver collectively to the workforce and to the business. And it's up to HR to really, take the reins and that change. It's not going to come from IT.
So in wrapping up, I just want to first of all thank you all for attending. Second of all, for those of you that are still tweeting, still doing that tweeting, and I would just say, please tweet. This is our year. This is our year for HR to change, for our HR process and HR technology to change. And from a Knowledge Infusion standpoint, we are going to work relentlessly to make sure that this year, when we look back at this year, at the end of 2012, that we look what we've done and go into 2013 in a completely different mindset where we're not as focused on the technology, but we're truly focused on outcomes, which at the end of the day is what's going to make HR more valuable. So on behalf of Heidi, myself, Blake, everyone at Knowledge Infusion, especially all of our employees that fuel us every single day, thank you so much for joining, and I really look forward to seeing you on our next web event. And as we talked about earlier, join us on Facebook, some fans, join us on Twitter. You'll see plenty of marketing and advertising around those events going forward. Heidi, thanks for doing this. It was a ton of fun.
A pleasure as always.
Talk soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.